Good morning, everyone. I will call the meeting of the the JPS Hospital District Governance Committee to order. Thank you all for being here. Scott, any citizens wishing to address? We have no citizens wishing to address the committee. I will ask for approval of our August 23rd minutes. Those are available to you on the portal and in a packet if you don't have the portal up. Well, now we got everybody. Good. Dr. Weber with the approval, and I'll give Ms. DeBose the second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. Those are approved. I don't have anything by way of a committee chair report, so we will just move on to item number 5, and we'll get Ron and Yolanda. We got everybody. Good. Let's take it.
All right. Well, good morning.
I did, buddy.
Let's see if we can get the slides going here. Okay. So I wanted to start today with just a quick update. What I typically do to start compliance update is to give you headlines, but I'm going to spare you this time with the enforcement actions and give you a little update on a roundtable that I attended a couple of weeks ago for American Hospital Association. American Hospital Association sponsors a National Chief Compliance Officer roundtable to talk about compliance issues affecting hospital systems across the country. And a very interesting discussion. One of the, these are the topics that we talked about. I think one of the interesting things that the AHA is doing with this group is developing this compliance maturity model tool. So it's basically looking at the 7 elements, we've talked about this before, 7 elements of an effective compliance program, and how can you objectively evaluate whether your compliance program is effective or not. And so they're basically developing a software tool that will be free, which is the key point, because to AHA members, which we are, and that was kind of been a bone of contention because they know that a tool like this could be commercialized and sold by vendors, and so they wanted this to be available to the profession. The other thing that was discussed that you may or may not have heard much about was this European Union privacy law called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU. And you might wonder, well, why does that affect anybody in the United States? Well, basically it has broad provisions that basically states that if any European resident in the EU or the UK come to the United States or any other country and let's say are treated for health care and we have their PHI in our EMR database because they were here, let's say they were in Fort Worth for some reason, then potentially we have to abide by this GDPR regulation because we treated them and we have their data, their PHI data. And you might think, well, that's no different than HIPAA, which actually GDPR goes beyond HIPAA in terms of what it requires, and so in terms of specially protected information and all of that. And so we heard a presentation from the Mayo Clinic folks about this, and they talked about how they're creating a compliance structure specifically around GDPR and how they're going to have a GDPR compliance officer and all of this stuff. And everybody else was kind of sitting there kind of shaking their head and say, are you guys going a little overboard with this? Because my question is, what's the legal ramification? Let's say, not to say that we non-comply, but what is someone from the EU actually going to file a suit against a U.S. entity, and how does all of that work? So this is kind of more of an emerging. It's not a emerging risk. We will look at it and to see the relevance to JPS and to see if there's any. For example, patients that are European residents that may be vacationing or live here, other than Brendan, who's from Ireland, that does our call center. So that's more of an emerging risk. And then, of course, they talked about the opioid crisis and related to pharmacy compliance. And as many of you saw recently, the administration just signed a new heightened regulation around opioid containment that got bipartisan support, and the AHA supported that measure as well.
Ron, just real quick on the GDPR, I asked Alan and Neil if they could do a little bit of research for this following our pre-meeting for this meeting. And they provided me with an article. I'll ask them to put it up on the portal if you want to read it. It seems to mainly center around medical apps and data, but it does have some teeth with, I think, the FEC or FTC and the Department of Transportation, of all things. My question was, we have sovereignty, why are we worried about the European Union? But apparently it's dealing with data. So it's a really interesting article. I did a quick read through it yesterday, but we'll put that on the portal and everybody can see it. But yeah, it kind of blows my mind, but
It has some real impact.
it has some teeth and some impact to it.
And I think really what the EU is trying to get to is the explosion of technology and get a handle on that. And one of the biggest things that is health and fitness trackers, technology that you would wear like your
Watches.
Apple Watch,
Fitbit.
that type of stuff, and they don't
Now
want
I can do my blood pressure and send it to my doctor's office.
people
Yeah.
monetizing
It's
that
$99,
information
yeah.
and using it. That's definitely something they're trying to get a handle on.
My Fitbit lies to me.
We'll make sure they get that information. Anyway, we'll ask them to put that article on the, if you're bored, you can read it.
Okay.
Thanks.
The only other thing I'll mention on this, one of the things they do is to go around all the hospital systems and talk about what are some emerging compliance challenges that other hospital systems are facing or that their heads of compliance have brought forward. And these 5 things were kind of some themes that came up there was about 30 or so hospital systems represented in this meeting. And this concept of medical device security related to, we have biomedical devices, and many of these devices are Bluetooth enabled and some of them can connect to the internet and to the cloud for various purposes, similar to the Fitbit conversation we had. And could those be compromised? We talked about cybersecurity before in terms of the Internet of Things, and how can biomedical equipment potentially be a kind of a new frontier for hackers to compromise, whether it be pumps or other kinds of new equipment that's enabled with internet connectivity. And so this was mentioned by several hospital systems as an area of emerging risk for them, that they are putting some time and effort around understanding what their inventory of medical devices are. Because in many cases, in a hospital system, you have many more medical devices than you do computers, laptops, and so forth, for obvious reasons. So again, don't know the exact applicability for us, but this is something that, that we'll look into as well. And the only other thing I would mention would be the compliance board education that would relate to all of you all. What are some of the ideas that other hospital systems are doing to educate their board about these emerging risks? And so I got some really good material from the participants that I'll share with you guys in upcoming meetings. So it was a good meeting.
Can I ask one question about what was the concerns on data sharing?
Oh, yes. So related to access. So access to, obviously, the first thing you would think of would be the EMR itself, the medical record. But how do organizations, particularly some of the ones that are represented were multi-state, multiple hospital organizations like CHI and HCA, and how do you manage access across the health system, to not only the EMR but all other subsystems that have patient data, or it doesn't even have to be patient data, it could be corporate data, sensitive corporate data, and kind of the challenge around that.
Yeah, I could see that because we do a lot of business associates agreements and they have access to data. I wonder how are they using that data, and can they have, once they get there, what all can they do with that data? So
Absolutely.
that would be one of the risks that I see with that.
And actually, interesting that you mentioned BA agreements, because that's something I know we've talked about here in compliance in terms of are our BA agreements current, and I know we keep them current with legal, but are they complying with it and the downstream effects of that?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Compliance update, Yolanda.
Good morning.
Morning.
During the August meeting, you approved the work plan, which included defined audits that we will be conducting, as well as other audits as needed. Regarding the external audits that are listed there, HMS is a contractor with the state of Texas to perform billing audits, and they have initiated several audits, of which we will provide you more information on those audits later on the agenda. And that will be the same for the Medicare 340B audit. We'll give you more updates later in the agenda. Regarding the internal audits, they're the ones that you have approved, and we want to make sure that you are aware of where we are with those particular audits. The coding modifier follow-up audit, that audit is underway. Again, modifiers are added to the bill to tell the payer to pay more or less. And the follow-up audit is to ensure the corrective actions identified in the initial audit that they are being implemented or are implemented. The next audit is the business associate agreement audit. That one is also underway. We have business associate agreements with various contractors that they have access to our patients' information, and we simply want to make sure that, one, those contracts that where the vendor does have access to patient information, that the BAA is in place, that is active, it hasn't expired. And those, we want to take a look at contracts that do not have a BAA and make sure that they should not have one. The DHG HIPAA mock audit with Dixon Hughes and Goodman, we've reported on it before. That audit is completed, and we are finalizing the results with DHG, and will be brought back to you later. The radiology oncology billing audit, that one is underway. That is one of the audits, again, that you all have approved for us to do. We have engaged an external auditor due to the complexity of billing and coding of radiation oncology, and that audit would actually begin in December. And that is my report. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions regarding the work plan audits? Okay. I don't.
So that will conclude the open session for compliance. One thing, before we conclude this section, I'll make mention of, we did, as we normally do, provide the the ethics point compliance graphs in the portal for our education initiatives and all the cases that we've been seeing over the course of the last period. So, I just wanted to make mention of that. So, next section is internal audit.
Okay, good morning. Morning.
You just ran by the ethics point cases, correct?
I'm sorry?
The ethics.
Yes.
I am red, green, and colorblind.
Oh, okay.
So,
Sure.
Primary issue under ethics, what is the big one for 210?
Okay, which one are you looking at?
It's the second graph on the compliance.
Okay, I see what you're saying. The primary issue?
Yeah.
That relates to HIPAA. And so, which is usually the case. So we break out that 210 cases and say what type of HIPAA cases they are, and then we break that out in the subsequent graph. But that relates to HIPAA-related cases. Yeah.
Ready?
Good morning.
Good morning. Since it's the beginning of a new fiscal year in 19, we don't have a report on the status of the audits for the year because we obviously haven't completed any just yet. So what I would like to do is take a moment to disclose to you the wrap-up of the fiscal 18 audit projects survey. After each assurance engagement, we conduct an anonymous audit process survey to our clients. We ask these 7 questions before you. They are actually rated on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree up to strongly agree. And what we see here today is a measure of performance for the fiscal year and the actual scores per question. I'd just like to point out there is a couple questions 2 and 3 that I really want to send a kudos out to the audit team. It is not always not all internal audit functions ask survey questions, but to get a status of work communicated effectively, I think that just shows the level of transparency that we have with the audit clients, and certainly being professional and courteous in that respect.
Well,
This
your
survey-
job's not always fun, so that's a big tip of the hat,
Yeah,
because
thank you. It's not.
there's a lot of scrutiny there, and I think that shows a lot.
Can I just ask one question on the number of folks that's responding to your survey? I know when you send the report, you give us a whole list of everybody that participated in it. Do all of them that's on those get a copy, because a survey is sent to them? Because it looks to me like you would have more than 31 folks on, that it went to, because one of those studies had 20 folks that you had worked with. And so I was just wondering how you decide, or
So great question. So we have a rule of thumb, because typically our audits take between 2 to 3 months. And our rule of thumb is spending 4 hours maximum on an engagement. So if any one person during that 2 to 3 month period has spent at least 4 hours actively engaged, either in interviews, observations with a client, those are the ones that we send surveys to. Because not everybody is going to be engaged from the whole perspective. We may have, 30 minutes with someone, or we may make very infrequent contacts with them. And so we send the surveys to everyone from the line level employee all the way through the executive, if they've had that contact with us for more than 4 hours during the engagement. Does that answer your question?
well, that answers why your number is low. It's 4 hours, but I was thinking you might want to expand it on a couple of your questions, because even though I didn't spend 4 hours with you, I still interacted with you. So was my objective to whoever I talked to clear? So that might be one that whoever participated, not all of them might go to it, but I think that just
Consider expanding
Sure.
it.
Yeah, expand
Sure.
it so you can
Get more
more,
respondents.
yeah.
Okay.
Because I looked at your survey, some of them didn't have a 1-1, you didn't send it to a 1-1, so that kind of makes it, if I know I'm the only one getting this, I'm gonna be cautious, okay?
Mhm.
All right. That's all I have, Carl.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, here is the summary of the results by the 4 major audits that we performed this year. You can see the respondents and the number of people we did send the surveys to, as Ms. DeBose alluded to. There were 31, and of course, we had 16 respondents on that end. We do have a final question. It's an open-ended question in the process, and that's the very last one. What do you like or dislike? What we've set up here before you is the responses. 100% of those responses are listed there if someone responded to it. Again, it's just, I think, a testament to the team's commitment, to the professionalism, and also to the maturity of the organization and the culture to be able to accept improvement opportunities in a very own it and mature manner and still look, sort of constructively at the process. Does that make sense? So again, all of these results in rare form are on your board portal. So if you have any questions or additional feedback on that, I'm certainly open to that.
Increase the goal.
And increase the goal? Yes, that was the other thing, I'm sorry. So we set a goal on a 5-point scale last year of 4.25, and we raised it this year to a 4.5 to try and make an average score. Does that make sense? This would be like sort of a benchmark.
Yeah. Michelle, for one of your free or open-ended response, there's a nothing.
Yes.
Could you touch on that? We
Well,
talked about it.
because it's, because it's anonymous, I can't speak to that. It was, what did you like or dislike? And that was actually the response. So again, I don't know who that was. I'm just being fully transparent in terms of what every response was.
I think it's easy to extrapolate that that's probably not a negative response as much as it is.
Especially.
They were fine.
It could be that I have nothing to comment.
Right.
Or I have,
Because the average score on that engagement was 496.
Right.
So I would submit to you, it probably isn't negative.
Very good.
That's all
Good
I have
progress.
for
And thank you for
open.
adding the respondents and their
Yes, sir.
surveys. That makes the graph. I looked at this graph at the pre-meeting and I was like, okay, what does this mean? So that makes it much more clear.
Sure.
So thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions regarding the annual client survey, internal audit? Great. Michelle, thank you. We will move now to closed session. at what, was it 11:41, 42?
41.
Thank you. We will reconvene back to open session at 12:47. Being no further business of the Governance Committee, we stand adjourned.